Okay, we are broadcasting live. Welcome everyone. This is the Attract More Readers and Sell More Books, How to Promote Your Own Book Without Feeling Sleazy. So you are in the right place for the Authors Guild webinar. Let's just give everyone a couple minutes to jump in and get started. While they do that, I'll go over some housekeeping things. We will do some instruction with Beth, and then at the end we will get to as many questions as we can with the time that we have. We'll be here today for approximately an hour and 15, hour and a half maybe. The end of that, the last 15 or 30 minutes will be the Q&A portion. So if you have any questions anytime throughout the webinar, you can go ahead and use the little Q&A button, which is either on the bottom of your screen or on the top of your screen. You just go ahead and push that button, type in your question, and then Beth will get to your questions at the end. So Beth is our panelist today. She's an author and a publishing professional with more than 20 years of experience helping writers navigate the complicated space between manuscript and final book. A former literary agent and marketing director, she's now a writer, ghostwriter, editor, and publishing consultant for both traditional publishing and self-publishing authors. She's also the author of the award-winning The Author's Guide to Marketing and the travel memoir, Walking to the End of the World, 1,000 Miles on the Camino de Santiago. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Beth.
Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate it. And thanks to all of you who are here. There are so many of you, according to our pre-registration numbers. And I'm excited to talk to you today about promotion strategies and opportunities for authors. We've got a lot to cover in the next 60 minutes, and I want to make sure we save as much time for your questions as possible. So I'm going to talk a little fast, and I apologize for that. I'm hoping that most of you were here a couple of months ago for my first webinar with the Authors Guild, which was much more about building an author platform and long-term marketing strategies to build a reputation for both yourself and also your work. If you weren't here, it is available through the Authors Guild website. No, I wonder why. You know, this thing worked right up until that happened. Let me figure out how to make, there we go. Okay. It is available through the Authors Guild website for members. Just go to the event archive, or you can go directly to YouTube and on the Authors Guild channel, and you can find the video for that there. It will talk about a lot of the things that authors have questions about, whether that's websites or social media or speaking, or basically how marketing is so much more than trying to sell something. So if you want to take a screenshot of that page right now so that you can get those addresses, that would be great. What we didn't cover in that session and what I want to talk about today is what happens when the rubber meets the road. Because you know what? You can build a platform at any time, but there are certain seasons where you have a book in hand and you want to sell that thing to some people. You want people to buy it. And so we talked about last time about how marketing, the definition of marketing is not sales. The definition of marketing is to build a positive impression, to build awareness. Promotion, on the other hand, promotion has a more specific end goal. You know, promotion is drawing attention to a product, organization, or venture, but let's focus on the product. So as to increase sales or public awareness, we are here to make people aware, make readers aware of the book that you have written or the books that you have written. And y'all, I get it. Promoting a book is hard work. And chances are you didn't really sign up to publish a book so that you could become a promoter or a marketer. But this is one of those things that comes with the job these days. You've probably seen the numbers by now that say there are more than 1 million books released each year. And they're all fighting for attention with the gazillion websites and TV shows and streaming channels and social media outlets and video games and apps and whatnot. And at the same time, it seems like there are probably also a gazillion companies coming after authors like us with big promises and bigger price tags. So let's talk about how to navigate our way through all of that. Because yeah, some of you have publishers that help with marketing and support. I have an incredible publisher, and I've had an incredible publicist and marketing department that's had my back for the last year with the release of my latest book. They have opened doors that I could not open by myself. But at the end of the day, they also have an entire list of books that they're releasing, and they are 2 seasons past mine. I'm not the center of their attention anymore, nor should I be, because this is my book. I have one book to promote, and they have a whole long list. My publisher is my partner, but at the end of the day, the long-term success of my books affects me most, and I need to take responsibility for that. And the flip side of that is that a lot of you, maybe even most of you, don't even have a publisher to provide that kind of backup support because you are your own publisher. And I've been in that boat too. When I published The Author's Guide to Marketing under the Sharper Words Press imprint, that's me all the way through. I am my publicity and marketing department, and my accounting department, and my finance department, and my sales department, and you get the idea. Either way, however you decide to do it, it comes down to you, and it comes down to your book and what you want it to happen. So how do you make your book discoverable? And I know that's kind of a buzzword, but how do you help readers who are going to love your book find your book? And how do you do that without making yourself miserable? This is part of the job now, but that doesn't mean it has to suck. Nor does it mean that we have to be those people throwing money into a bottomless pit. I spent years as a literary agent helping authors navigate their book launches. And then I spent more years as a marketing director for an author services company that specialized in self-publishing authors, helping those authors launch their books. And I put my money where my mouth is, and I released a few books of my own, and I've learned a few things that I want to share that helps us get to that point of it doesn't have to suck. As always, I want to point out that there is no one-size-fits-all formula. Sorry, I can't give you, if you take 2 things from column A and 2 things from column B, you'll find yourself on the bestseller list. You're all writing different books, and you're writing for different people, and you're writing in different ways. And more than that, you're all different people with different strengths. So the same ideas that we're going to talk about will work differently for each of you in your own channels and in your own ways. So what I want to do is in the next little bit, I want to give you a lot of opportunity, a lot of lists of possibilities and some structure to think about it, and then give you the ability to use your critical thinking skills to know, and based on what you know about your book and yourself and your audience, and see what works for you. That part about knowing your book and yourself, that's something that we talked about a lot in the previous session. And so again, there's a video record of that if you want to walk through that process of understanding your own strengths and understanding how to describe and talk about your book. That's all available on the video. But I do want to revisit the third part of that, because knowing your audience is a key part of the beginning of the promotional strategy. If you have a book that is out in the world, or you have a book that is about to be out in the world, it's important that you know who your core audience is. Who are the supporters, dedicated readers, and early adopters who are so into your topic or your style of writing that they are going to love your book, regardless of whether they know you or not. This is not about friends and family. This is about people who, if they just saw your book sitting on a bookstore shelf, they would naturally pick it up because it piques their interest. And it's not just about who they are, it's about where they are. And I don't mean that necessarily in a geographic sense. Although some of you probably have books that will appeal specifically to people who live in a certain place. They have regional interest. But you might also have books that appeal to people who watch certain kinds of TV and movies. Or you have books that appeal to people who are part of certain types of houses of worship or faith backgrounds. Or you have books that are for people who are deep in the trenches of certain stages of life. You're writing about parenting or about caring for elders. If you're writing children's books, it's pretty easy to know where your audience is. Your 5th grade reader is in school right now. But also remember that your 5th grade reader probably isn't the one buying the book. You're also reaching out, when you're talking about audience, to the parents and the grandparents, the teachers and the librarians, who are the ones who will influence and shape what that 5th grader is reading. So think about them and where did they find out about books? If you're writing history, who are the people who are most interested in that particular period or people or place that you're exploring? Where are they finding their information? Are there events? Are there journals and magazines? Where do they gather? Even if that's not necessarily in a physical space. You know, when I wrote about the Camino de Santiago, it was pretty easy to figure out who my core readers were. My core readers were the hundreds of thousands of people who had either walked the trail across Europe themselves or were interested in doing it. And I did a little research and I figured out that they already had online Facebook groups, and they had an organization that had a magazine, and they had a national gathering, and they had regional chapters. So I had a good idea where that core group was. I knew that they were older. You know, this is a trail and a walk that often appeals to people in retirement. This was a trail that appealed to people who liked to shop in person. You know, one of the things that I decided in starting out my promotion process was that this was an audience that didn't shop online as much as they shopped at independent bookstores and travel stores and outdoor stores. And so that really affected everything that came next. But on the other side, let me tell you about an author friend of mine who is a novelist. And she wrote contemporary family drama set in a quirky and quaint small town. And when she was talking about her audience, she was looking for readers who were almost exclusively women, primarily over 40, who had busy lives, but loved escapist fiction, loved the kind of fiction that took them to vacation-like places. Setting was very important to them, and the idea of place really is what drew them together. They loved TV shows like The Gilmore Girls, and they loved the Hallmark Channel, and they looked for their books primarily online because they are voracious readers who read author after author and are very loyal to authors and follow series and follow families and love that idea of the family saga. Now, she found all of that out, or she figured all of that out, by the way, by making sure that she knew her contemporary or her comparative authors. Who are the other people who your readers are also reading? One of the great things about books is that we don't have to have a competition. We get to have a collaboration, because readers don't read only one book. It's not like a refrigerator. You only pick one refrigerator. But if you're a reader, you're finding new authors and new books all the time. And so as authors, we have the chance to work together and to recognize that people who like me also like someone else. When you put all of these ideas together, the first step of promotion is to think about who you're targeting. And you know what? Write it down. I'm not usually much of one for charts, but I'm going to give you a chart today because I think it helps to think about this in ripple effect. I think it helps to think about this as the small circle of people who are most interested. Who are the people who are going to be drawn to your book no matter what, because they love the topic and they are actively seeking it out? And then think about the people who might be probably interested. It's not a sure thing. Maybe they don't know exactly your topic. Maybe they don't read, 3 novels a week and are always looking for the next thing. But you share certain areas of common interest and you share certain areas of common connection. And so they're the probably interesteds. And then there's a third circle of maybe interesteds. So my Camino de Santiago book, my core group were the people who already knew about this specific trail and this specific pilgrimage route and wanted to know about that. My probably interested are people who are seeking travel memoir, who are seeking personal stories of adventure and exploration. For me, my maybe interesteds were people who were more of the outdoor enthusiast types, the long distance thru hikers who love the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail, the backpackers and mountaineers. Because for my particular book, it didn't exactly fit in those categories, but we had a certain overlaps. And I thought that maybe they would be interested in talking about something that was a little outside their norm, but still something that they would be willing to talk about. When you're thinking about your own readership, the things that define your audience are all going to be different. Maybe it is gender, like the novelist I said. Maybe it's age. Maybe it's social or religious views. Maybe it's geography, hobbies, entertainment, other favorite authors. Especially if you write informational nonfiction, your readers are going to gather as a reflection of what they care about. They're looking for information that you are providing. They're already asking questions. And so if you can identify what those questions are and identify how you can provide those answers, then you're taking a good first step toward being able to connect with them. Maybe they're parents caught up in the day-to-day and asking themselves how to raise better kids. Maybe they're adults facing, certain stages of life and transitions where they're reflecting on what they believe or what they think. Maybe it's people who, millennials who just need help with finances. It's important to not just know who they are, but also to know where they are. If you know those questions, if you know who those most important, most interested, probably interested, maybe interested people are, push back and ask yourself where they are. What are they commonly reading? Are there websites? Are there journals? Are there particular social media channels where they're hanging out and using hashtags? Are there physical spaces in your community? Are there conferences and conventions? And also, where do they shop? This is harder to figure out, and it will probably relate partly on just your instinct. We know that half of books today are sold online and half of them are sold in physical spaces, give or take. But there's not a lot of information that breaks that down into what kinds of books sell online and what sells in person. So look at your particular kind of book and ask yourself, where do people buy this? Where do I buy my books? Okay, so that's the homework. That's the background. Now let's take that information and make it practical. Because now that you have an idea of who your audience is, it's time to start promoting the book. In 2010, an author named Shama Kabani wrote a book called The Zen of Social Media Marketing. It's not a book that is about selling books. It's actually not about writing at all. It's not necessarily only about social media. But one of the ideas that came out of that book for me almost 10 years ago was this very pragmatic, trust-based approach that I really liked. She introduced this simple acronym called ACT that has really guided my marketing and promotional efforts since then. And I want to use it as the structure for the dozens of things we're about to talk about. It's attract, convert, transform. So the first step of promotion is attracting. Attracting is simply bringing new eyeballs to your book. You're building awareness. You're getting your name and your book title in front of people you don't know in a positive way that they'll remember. Attraction is most of the things that we talked about in that first session about building a platform. You're building awareness of who you are. But it's also a lot of things that directly promote the book. Outside of book marketing, if you're driving down the road and you see a billboard is an example of attraction marketing because it's flashing at you, it's making you aware, it's bringing a brand name into your consciousness, but there's not an immediate action that you can take. You can't, you're not going to pull over your car and call and change your car insurance company just because you saw a billboard. There's almost never a direct buy me message in attraction marketing because that's not the point of it. It's name recognition. It's when we step into converting the customer, converting the consumer, that we go from be aware to take action. Converting turns that attracted stranger into a customer, which means in our case, they're buying our books, or a consumer, which means that they are entrusting us and deepening the connection to us in some way that will eventually lead them to become a customer. In the case of authors, that almost always means that they are signing up for a mailing list, or even just coming to an event, showing up, being present, making some kind of commitment. Don't discount that role of bringing them into the circle farther. Don't discount the role of making them consumers as well as customers, because this is a long-term journey, and that is when they share their name or their address or their presence with you, it is one step closer to making them a reader and to making them a dedicated reader. So we've converted somebody, we've gotten them to buy the book. The third step of marketing, and something that easily gets overlooked, I think, as we think about it, is this idea of transformation. This depends on the idea of social proof. You know, we as human beings are more likely to invest in something, to do something, if we believe that someone else has already done it, and someone we trust has already done it and had a positive experience. Transformation is when we take people's past experiences and put them in front of others so that they are more ready to commit. Everything you do to promote your book fits into this model in some way. And when we think about how to build a strategy, when we think about how to build a promotion, the idea is always to create a balance of activities. You know, no one activity is going to bring you all the way to a sales success. But if we look at how to bring these three things together, we get closer. And that starts at the very beginning. That starts with your book cover itself. One of the best ways I have to show you what attract, convert, transform looks like is if we take a book cover and take it apart. Because attraction, that's that book cover. If you look only at the front book cover, you know, studies say a consumer, a shopper will look at a book cover for no more than 6 seconds. And in those 6 seconds, you have either brought them in, given them a positive impression, made them know that they want to see more, or they've decided that they're not interested. They're not going to make an entire sales decision based on that cover probably, but it's their first impression. The second thing that they do when they pick up a book, they flip it over. They read the back cover. The converting is your cover copy text. You have 200 words. And if you're a self-publishing author, those 200 words are some of the most important copy you will ever write, because that's what decides whether they commit to the book or not. As people have studied readers who are looking at books, and they look at the front cover, they flip it over, they read the back cover, and by then they know whether they're in or out. Do not skimp on this. Do not rush this. Do not wait until the last minute to write your cover copy. Do not publish it without running it past a lot of other people. Pay attention to how you make your promise here, because this is what turns them into a reader. But you'll notice that the only thing on that back cover is not just the cover copy. Book covers are full of, in different ways, endorsements, blurbs, copy from outside people that talk about how great this book is. And that is an example of what transformation does. Because transformation is when we say, somebody else read this book before I did. Somebody I trust read this book before I did, and they had a good experience with it. It almost doesn't even matter what the blurb says. Its very presence is enough to convince a consumer that they're not the first person to read this book, that they're not the first person to try to make an opinion. And so while they may not report that blurbs make an enormous sales decision, from the principles of marketing and promotion, they really do. So that's our book cover. That's attract, convert, transform. You can see how promotion works from just that one perspective. But let's take it farther, because now you have a book in your hands. And there's all of these different ways that people are talking about how to get it out there and do those things. So I want to talk about a lot of them and kind of see where they fit in. How do you know about what promotion techniques to use and how do you use them? Again, I want to point out, not every technique works for every person. I am not suggesting you do everything that we're going to talk about, but listen for the ones that connect with you. Listen for the ideas that connect with your audience and with the ways that it will work. These are ticklers in your mind for a future time. If you have a book out already, take an honest evaluation of where you are and which parts of this marketing strategy you've been missing and how you can shift your overall promotional efforts to bring new life back into that book. We start with attract. You know, what do we do to make a first impression? And every author I talk to, when they talk about attraction, when we talk about promotion, we almost always start by saying, how do I get on TV? How do I get on Oprah? How do I get on Good Morning America? Or more realistically, how do I get on my local news? How do I get covered in my local newspaper? PR and media, publicity and press releases are some of the most visible ways that we as authors promote ourselves to the population and get known by them. And it's important to understand that publicity and public relations is just one small part of marketing. We're going to talk about it for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to move on to other things. It's what happens when you're seeking free media. It's what happens when you put your material out there, your message out there, and hope that someone else picks it up and shares it with their audience without you having to pay for it. It might be that television or that newspaper or that magazine coverage. These days, it might be an interview on a popular blog or website or a podcast interview. If somebody else is talking about you, then that's attraction. If you have a publisher, they are probably going to handle this area of publicity for you in the first few months surrounding your book release. Work with them. Their press list is probably better than yours. But for many of us who are doing this on our own, or our books have been out for a little while and our publicist is busy working on the next list, that doesn't mean that our opportunities have disappeared. We have ways to reach out directly. If you can Google how to write a press release and find dozens of templates that will help you fit the profile and fit the patterns of what people are looking for. But I want to point out that what you're pitching is not just you, and it's not just your book. Author releases new book is not really news, unless you are in a hometown with a very small newspaper. Remember that we have 1 million books releasing every year. And so there's 1 million different stories about new book, but there's only one story about you. And there's only one story about what you have written about and what your expertise level is related to what is going on right now. If you want to get interviewed by the media, think about what you offer them that they are already looking for. And for me, a lot of times that comes down to current events. One of my favorite stories that's related to this is a few years ago, I was working with an author who had written historical fiction and a historical romance novel, to be precise. And it was called Heirs and Spares. And it was a pretty classic story about, you know, the prince who wants to become the king, but he's going to lose his kingdom if he doesn't get married. And so he marries somebody who he doesn't really know, and there's conflict, and they eventually come together. Classic romance, beautiful book, really good writing. Hard to convince the media that this is something worth a story, right? You know, author releases romance book isn't going to get me attention. But the summer that she wrote that book happened to be the same time that Prince William and Princess Kate were expecting their first baby. And the entire world was on royal baby watch. I don't know if you remember, everybody's waiting for the new heir of the British throne. And so what we did We created a press release that said, Royal Baby Watch. Seattle novelist explores the historical importance and intrigue of royal heirs just in time for a new Windsor. Because that baby was overdue. That media was running the same story over and over, and they were tired of it. They were bored. You could tell. And so they needed a fresh perspective. And I had an author who happened to have a master's degree in history and had all of this knowledge about how kings and queens come together, and had a new book. And so that press release got her a bunch of local news coverage, local NPR interviews, local television, local things, connected her to some really influential people who helped her career going forward. But what was important was that she didn't go on those interviews just to talk about her book. She went on to talk about the area that she was an expert in. So think about what you could do that would be an expert in that community. And sometimes you have to make that up. Did you know that September 19th is National Hug Your Boss Day and also National Talk Like a Pirate Day? All of September is National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month and also National Mushroom Month. It turns out that we have holidays and designations for just about anything. If you look at one of the National Day calendars that are available online, you can find some kind of holiday that is relevant to what you're writing about. And then think about how you could talk about those things and talk about those things in a way that would interest people. If you want to do media, one last point, do your homework. Do not pitch a group that you do not know. Don't send out mass mailings of press releases to publications or websites or podcasts that you have never listened to. If you want to pitch a podcast, make sure you download a couple of their episodes and know how to do that and know what kind of questions they ask so that you can introduce yourself in a way that makes sense to that. Okay, that's a lot of attention on media coverage and publicity. Let's talk about other things. Here is a low-hanging fruit that is often overlooked these days because we like technology and we like all of these things. Get yourself a little bit of inexpensive promotional swag. Those might be postcards, those might be bookmarks, those might be business cards. Whatever it is, even in a digital age, it is incredibly helpful to have a physical reminder of what you're doing. Because if you talk to somebody in the middle of today, if you get off this webinar and you go to the grocery store and you're chatting with the guy at the butcher counter, or you meet another writer at a meetup for writers later today, and you talk about your book, and that person says, "Hey, that sounds interesting." Chances are they are then going to go home, and the dog will have thrown up on the carpet, and the kids will need attention, and something else will have happened. And it's hard to remember everything that we've talked about, everything that we've seen. But if you can give them something, if you can just keep a pocket full of bookmarks or a little bag, a few postcards in your purse so that you can hand them out to people as you meet them, to give them that visual reminder. It's funny, I was at a book launch last week for a fellow author who came out with a new book, and I was standing in his book signing line because authors buy copies of other authors' books. We support each other. And I was chatting with the person in line behind me, and she said, "Oh, how do you know this author?" And I said, "Oh, well, we share a publisher. There was another book coming out from the same publisher." "Oh, well, that starts a conversation about the book that I've written." And I don't want to make this conversation all about me because we're standing in another author's book line. But I do want to be able to pull out a postcard and give her something that she can take home and look up later if she's interested. Dozens of online printing companies will do this for not much money, and it's worth the small amount of attention that you're going to put into it. Another popular way to do attraction is to think about paid advertising. And this is something that I get a lot of questions about. Paid advertising is everything from those billboards that we talked about at the beginning to print ads in literary magazines or review magazines, to paid placements on Facebook because they're going to push that on you a lot, to Amazon ads. This is tricky and sometimes controversial because people have a lot of different opinions about whether advertising is worth it, whether paid advertising is worth it. It's really hard to track the responses to something like a print ad. You know, if you put a print ad in a journal or a magazine, it's hard to know whether that directly leads to sales. We can see that more for online ads, but as that market continues to grow and continues to saturate, sometimes we're not always seeing the responses that other people are talking about. And it's really hit and miss. I know authors who have had incredible success with Amazon ads because they did their homework and they knew that their audience was shopping on Amazon and was actively looking for new books. And I know a lot of authors who have not had that success. Their audience isn't there, or their targeting keywords weren't quite right, or whatever it is. In my experience, people rarely click on social media ads and buy a product based on that. They will look at promoted posts. They will look at promoted Instagram. They will look at social media pieces for experiences much more. And so I know that my publisher will pay for Facebook promotions for book signings and for events more than they will just to try to publicize a particular book. Because then you're going through that conversion process and you're bringing someone in so that they're making a commitment to find out more. And then hopefully that event is the thing that actually sells the book. Whatever happens with this, know your audience, know what drives them to buy. If you're writing, grand literary fiction, those people are not as affected by advertising in their decisions as they are by other things. If you're writing children's books, those people are not as affected by advertising as they are by word of mouth, perhaps, or something else. So I'm not saying don't invest in ads. There's a lot of you who are doing Facebook promos and Amazon ads and have found success there. I'm saying if you do it, make sure you understand it. Make sure you understand what you want to get out of it, and make sure you're tracking those responses to the best of your ability to know if it's working for you. Let's talk about another thing though, because I think one of these is overlooked. As far as attraction, giving books away. A few years ago when Amazon first started their Kindle, one of the best ways to market or promote a book at all was to use the ebook giveaway. Make your Kindle free for a few days, watch thousands of people download it, and watch your sales numbers shoot up. That worked for a while, and then it saturated, and then it became a little less visible. And while people are still giving away Kindle books, it's not as clear, it's not a guaranteed thing that will affect your sales. So then we shifted to Goodreads. The Goodreads website, if you're familiar with it, is the reading community. It's a place where people come to track their books, to write reviews, to talk about books. It's a lot of fun. One of the things it did for a while was have a book giveaway where a publisher or an author could offer to send books, they designated the number of books, to readers who signed up for a drawing or a competition. And the Goodreads algorithms would figure out who is most likely to like your book. And they would draw the names, and the author would be then responsible to send those books out. And that was a way to get more reviews, get more visibility, get in front of more people. Last year, they decided to stop making that a free program. And it's now something that people pay for. Authors and publishers have to pay not an insignificant amount for the right to give their book away for free. And so that has gotten less effective, perhaps, because we have to measure what is the balance of attraction, what is the balance of response compared to what I'm putting into it. I never want to be spending more money than I'm getting value out of what I'm doing long term within that marketing strategy. And so we're looking for the new ways to do this, because giving books away to readers is absolutely a way to break through that barrier of discoverability. 1 million books a year. They have a lot of other things. A lot of times what you need to do is seed that market and get it in front of people. This is a 20-year-old story by now, but one of the most fantastic success stories of promotion I've ever heard is an author who had written a memoir. And it was a great memoir. It was written for a younger audience. It was probably written for a 20-something audience. And it hadn't done great. It had come out to middling success, and it was plodding along. And then the author and publisher decided to do something big. They donated books to an entire incoming group of college students who were gathering together for a leadership seminar and then going out to various places, their various schools across the country. And the publisher and the author gave a book for free to every single one of these attendees, and then let them go back and spread out to their various schools. And that was really the tipping point for that book, because it was a great book. It had great content. It was important. It just hadn't risen above the scale. And so this was the way that they got it into readers' hands. And then those college kids started talking about it, and they started talking to their friends about it. And it started to have this kind of ripple effect movement where the book became popular across the country. And it went on to become a perennial bestseller. But the author will say that part of that was going back to that initial giveaway. Most of us do not have the opportunity to give away hundreds of books to an influential group like that. But we still have ways to give books away to readers. And this goes back to knowing your audience and knowing where they gather. And so maybe it's a partnership with a local nonprofit or even a local business that will take a few copies of your book and use it as a promotional of their own. Last Christmas, you can see the picture on the screen. I partnered with a travel company in the UK who was promoting their own Camino de Santiago tours. But one of the ways they did it was through an online Instagram competition where they gave away autographed copies of my book. They promoted that book. They made it visible to their audience day after day after day. And all I needed to do was give them a few books and give them a few signatures, a few signed copies of the book. That was my contribution to it. Other authors have partnered with charities or done donations for events. You'll see, if you're part of any kind of nonprofit or community group that does an auction or a charity gathering, you'll see gift baskets and silent auctions donated by authors to make their books more visible to that group of people. So you're giving away one book, but you're getting exposure to all of the people who are attending an event. Okay. Oh, we got to talk. Let's move past this idea of attraction, and let's talk about what converting is. So you've done all of this stuff, all of the things we talked about in the last session, building websites, being on social media, speaking, all of that is attraction. You're drawing people in, you're making people aware of you. How do you get them to make the sale? Well, if the two most critical parts of making that sale are going to fall on the publisher, if you have a publisher, or on your self-publishing hat and initial decisions, if that's your role. Because the first one is straight up the price point. I think we don't always think about how much our book costs as being a part of promotion. But if we're not comparative to other books, if you're selling a novel and most of your comparative authors are selling a novel for $15 and you're selling for $25, you're discouraging somebody making that sale. If you are writing if your ebook is too inexpensive, a lot of reader surveys and author surveys will say that readers aren't going to take it as seriously as certain books. And so there are thresholds. There are places where you stay within. And there's also the opportunity for sales and promotion. You know, I'm not knocking the idea of a free Kindle giveaway for authors who are part of that program. I'm not knocking the idea of making it available for sale either through your website or through your publisher or something if you have that opportunity. Price is something that will help make people's decisions. But the other piece to think about is placement. Getting it in bookstores, getting it to other retailers. Where does a person find your book in the place where they can buy it? They can't buy it if they can't see it. And so your publisher or you as the self-publisher have the opportunity to connect with local bookstores or focus your efforts primarily online if that's where your buyers are. And also think about other opportunities for those sales. You know, people don't just buy books on Amazon or in physical bookstores. Does your book have a topic or a theme that would make it appropriate to sell in another place? If you have a very location-based book, is it appropriate for gift shops or tourist shops in that place? You know, I know a lot of you are writing beach novels or books set in beautiful places. Can you connect with that place? If you're writing a cookbook, does it fit into your local kitchen store? If you're writing a gardening book or a book about gardening, does your gardening center carry it? Think about these variety of places where people who are interested in your audience are going to be shopping and are going to be finding your product. And make sure you're putting the time and effort into making sure it's there. If you're selling primarily online, if you are an author whose audience is shopping online, make sure that you are drawing attention to where that sale can happen. And the way to do that, let's think about what these other author opportunities are. On your website, because I know that by now you have a website because every author needs to have a website. Do you have very visible, very clear buy the book links? And not just buy the book on Amazon. Unless your book is exclusively available on Amazon, and most of ours are not, make sure you're giving your readers and your visitors options. Because not everyone wants to shop there. Not everyone wants to shop at the everything store. Some of them want to figure out where they can buy a local book. They want to find the independent bookstore. They want to find they support Barnes & Noble or they support Books A Million. And it doesn't cost you anything to create not just one link on your books page, but several links to give that opportunity. The other thing is to share special offers to your subscribers and your inner circle. Can you give away signed book plates to people who have bought your book for certain holidays? Can you give them people who subscribe or buy the book directly from you, can you give them bonus content? Can you email them and send them material that will help them feel like they're part of that special group? Encourage them to make that commitment with that promise of something more. We like that bonus idea. Human beings want to have that limited time special and want to have that, my book is different than everybody else's. Maybe it's just because it's signed. Maybe you can offer direct sales through your website or through your channels to say, here's how we can, here's something special just for you. And that's something that we want to talk about is if you're getting people to make that sale, if you're convincing people to make that investment, are you equipped to sell books directly? And this is a complicated question for some of us because it requires a level of businessy stuff. At most, we need to figure out whether we have the right bank accounts. How are we going to take payment? More and more, we have, cell phones have the opportunity to have the card readers and the swipe systems so that your phone can become a payment system. But you need to have all that set up. You need to ask yourself, and you need to ask your accountant, because I am not an accountant, what the tax implications of selling directly are. Chances are, if you're in the United States listening to this, you will be responsible for paying sales tax in the states where you're selling books directly. And what does that mean for you? It's a little bit different for each state. But the trade-off of all of that upfront logistical is that you are always in a place where you can make the sale when you have that face-to-face connection. You're not asking a potential reader to go do one more step. You're not asking a potential reader to, oh, you've met me, we've talked about this, but now you need to go to this other place and buy the book. At any point where you put a barrier between them and the purchase, you're creating a potential distraction. I can track who clicks through to various sales websites from my website, and I can track how many of them actually buy books. And, it's not 100%. Even the people who say, I want to buy this book, click here, it's not 100% of who goes. But when I have a live event, when I have an in-person event where I'm speaking or where I'm sharing and people are standing there, I want to be able to hand them a book right then so that they can go home with it. I do not want to knock the importance of bookstores, because that is one of the primary ways that we do sell books. And I think as authors, one of the ways that we feel like we should be promoting our books, one of the traditional things and one of the ideas of what we want to do has always been, I should do bookstore events. I should do readings. Authors do readings in bookstores. That's how we sell books. And it makes sense. And it is a great way to draw attention to yourself and to bring in people who are then going to make that commitment. These are harder for you and the bookstore than they look. It takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of time for a bookstore to put on an event with an author. And so from their perspective, they need to know that that author has an audience who's going to come. That, we've all heard the horror stories of the events where 2 people show up, 3 people show up. Best-selling authors come and say, I did an event in a town where I didn't know anyone and 5 people came to my event. And if that happens, then they cancel the event and they all go to the bar. But if you're an author who is looking to do a bookstore event, if you're an author who is looking to partner with a bookstore and to share your work in their space, you are there as much to build that long-term relationship with the bookstore as you are to connect and immediately sell with readers. Because that person in the bookstore is going to be your advocate and your ambassador for a long time if you make a good impression. So if you get a bookstore that's going to do an event, go all out, promote that event to your list, promote that event to your friends, let everyone know. Consider it your job to draw an audience to the event. Don't think that the bookstore is going to do it for you. And then when you get there, be as helpful as you can. Set up chairs, bring snacks, be funny, sign books for as long as they want you to. As much as possible, make this an event that is positive and encourages people to buy, not just in that moment, but going forward. And then don't just think about events at a bookstore. There's a lot of things that you can do as an author that are outside that traditional bookstore channel. And I think this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of conversion, where are there places where my book fits that are outside bookstores? If I wrote a gardening book, should I sell it in a gardening store? Well, let's expand that conversation and say, if you wrote a gardening book, are there events that you could do in a gardening store that would be appropriate for that audience? Can you give a talk about gardening, not necessarily your book, but about the topic that would be of interest to the audience? Or can you partner with other authors? Seattle is on the verge, Seattle, which is where I live, is on the verge of our first children's book festival. It's going to be next weekend. And it was organized by children's book authors. 49 of them, I think 50 of them, have come together and are creating this entire festival fair day. There are panel talks, and there's author signings, and there's events for the kids. And they have created this entire fun process that is very much promotion. They are going to be selling the heck out of their books while they're there. But they've also created an event that's fun for the community and fun for the audience. And they've come together to partner to bring together as many people as they can. There may be other authors in your community who you can partner with to do certain kinds of events. Maybe it's a booth at your local farmer's market near the holiday season when people are shopping for books, or the summer craft festival. Maybe there's a specific day, we will have a holiday book festival this fall or in November, where a group of authors for adults who all live in the same neighborhood are doing something similar, where we are creating a day. We're going to have music, we're going to have readings, we're going to have snacks and a bake sale, and we're going to sell a lot of books because that's when people are shopping. That's what people are looking for. If you have not launched your book yet, if you're still in the process of thinking about books and planning for books, this is also the place where you would think about, do you want to have a launch party? Is there a single event where your book comes out and you invite those who are closest, that core group of audience and your main supporters, and give them a chance to both celebrate and also buy some books and build some momentum right outside the door? Okay. Hey, we're right on schedule. We're doing good. The one last thing I want to talk about, and the thing that is easy to forget, perhaps, is this idea of transformation. Once somebody has committed to a book, your relationship with them is not done. But also, sometimes the best way to get them to commit to a book is to make sure that others are sharing their opinions. And the way to do that is, seek reviews. Book reviews are one of the primary ways that we know that somebody else has liked the book. We started that conversation when we talked about the blurbs on the front cover and on the back cover. But also, there's a reason that there are long-term, long-standing book review publications. If before you are released, you landed a review in a library journal or a Publisher's Weekly or a Kirkus Review or a Book Life, that is something that is a transformational promotional opportunity. It is a way for others to understand what has happened and understand what their experience is. Especially libraries, bookstores, places that are going to consider carrying your book will really value that kind of review. But it's not clear that readers do. And so if we're talking about promotion, I don't want to get too stuck on, did you get a professional review before your book came out? Because those are both time sensitive, and if your book is already out, that door has closed, and also not the most effective way to reach readers. So readers these days are not necessarily looking for what the experts say. They're looking for what other readers say, right? We live in a time of peer reviews. Anything from the hotel that you stay in to the car driver that you use to the book that you read or the product that you read is all based on how many stars a bunch of strangers have given it and what their experiences have been. I'm not going to buy a pair of jeans if 20 people have said that they're terrible jeans, and I'm not going to buy a book unless I can see what the reviews are and what other people thought. And you can't control everything about those peer reviews, but you can make it a point to encourage them and to ask for them. I think authors have an opportunity, especially if you are involved in social media or if you have a mailing list, to go out and ask your readers to write reviews. Most average readers, most people who aren't spending their Thursday figuring out how the book industry works, are not aware of how powerful their influence is. And so I see a lot of authors get success by just asking their readers. Don't tell them what to say. Don't feed them. Don't ask them for a good review. But just an occasional message in a mailing list or on social media that says, hey, I've got 27 reviews. If I get 3 more, I'm looking for 3 more. I'm looking to get to 30. Or I've got 250 reviews and I'm looking to get to 300. If you have read my book, would you take 5 minutes and go to the place of your choice? A lot of them will be Amazon, but again, not everyone goes there. Maybe it's their library website. My library and most of the libraries in my area now have reviews on their pages. Maybe it's their local bookstore. Maybe it's their local channels. But ask them, would you go somewhere and tell people about what your experience was? Your opinion matters. And help them understand, help your readers understand how much their opinion matters and how much their input will affect what happens to you next. I think readers like to feel important. They like to feel seen. We as authors sometimes forget that there's this perceived barrier. We're looking to the readers because they determine what happens to us, but they're looking to us and thinking that we have some kind of experience that they don't. And so transformation is not just a chance for you to shoot out all of the nice things, all of the blurbs. It's really a chance for you to build a relationship with your readers and to make them part of your team. Which brings me to something that people have talked about a lot, which is the launch team. Some authors who are in the process of getting ready to release a book, and this is a pre-release strategy that works directly with transformation, is they create a launch team. They invite a certain limited number of people who are enthusiastic about their work to a closed private group that gets some kind of benefit. They get one-on-one contact with the author, they get bonus content, they get personal interviews or conversations, and in exchange, and they get an advance copy of the book. They get to read the book before it releases. And in exchange, that launch team will then use their influence, their social media, their websites, their book clubs, their groups of friends, to then spread the word, to then talk about what that looks like. So as soon as the book comes out, you have 50, 100, 200 people enthusiastically spreading it around. And you're just building this momentum based not on a paid advertisement or a promotion, but based on some really natural enthusiasm that comes out of it. Launch teams take a lot of work and they take a lot of planning. You have to think about this 3 to 6 months before your book comes out. And so it's obviously not something that works for everyone. But if you are in a place where you're planning the launch of another book, think about this as a way to launch with a bang, to get that discoverability, to get past that million other books. Both of these really come down to the idea of sharing positive reviews. We talked at the beginning about how marketing, we want to promote our book. We want people to be aware of it, but we don't want to seem sleazy about it. We don't want to, go on Facebook every day and say, buy my book, or start every conversation with a, hey, did you buy my, you don't want to ask people straight up to buy the book. Transformation is a way to approach this in a very different way, because what we're talking about is not sales, it's gratitude. And that gratitude continues to spread the word and show people that this has been a positive experience for others. And one of the ways to do that is to think about every now and then, not every day, not all the time, but every now and then, just share one of the reviews that has come in. And share it not as a, look how cool I am, but share it as a, I'm so grateful for my readers. The image on the screen there is just a Facebook post that, an author used to say, gosh, people are so nice. I got another beautiful review for my book. Thank you so much. I'm happy that people are learning and responding with heartfelt gratitude for the tears and laughter that the indomitable character of Lily Claire gives them. And that kind of message feels natural, and I hope it is natural. I hope that you as authors are deeply grateful for the fact that readers are investing their time and their money in your words. But also it requires a little intentionality. I have to remind myself not to just stalk my Amazon reviews, not to just stalk my Goodreads reviews, but also to pick them up every now and then and use them as a way to encourage my audience as well as myself. Side note, you do this with the positive reviews. We are all going to get negative reviews. Some reader is not going to like your book. They're not going to understand your book. They're not going to understand you, and that's okay. Leave that alone. Don't answer it. Don't respond. Don't argue. Don't share it. Don't complain. Just let it go. Okay, that was a whole side note. I maybe got my first 2-star review in the last couple of weeks. One more thing. Actually, 2 more things. Awards. Book awards are another way to think about transformation because, again, this is something respected and credible and known that has said you have done a good job. There are a lot of book awards out there right now. A lot of them are well respected and long-term and draw a lot of respect. And a lot of them are scams that want you to pay a lot of money and don't really promote you outside of that. So I think that thinking about awards, especially in the first year after your book is released, which is when most books are eligible for awards, is a good idea. But be sure you're doing your homework. Make sure you're looking at who sponsors this award. Is this a group that has credibility? Is this an award that has been around for a long time? Is this an award that you recognize some of the other authors who have won and can see what it has done for them? It depends on your genre. It depends on the kinds of books you're writing. But many of the fiction, especially, you'll find that the national organizations have channels and have those things. A lot of regional writers conferences, Pacific Northwest Writers Association, again, here in Seattle, just met last weekend, and they have a really well-respected contest and a series of awards for attendees to that conference. And the agents and the publishers who are coming to that are looking at who's winning those awards. The shoppers in the bookstore are looking at who's winning that award. So think about awards as a way to build that credibility again. And I have one more point, and then we're going to move on to questions. And that's this: take pictures. I think that writers are sometimes averse to how important image has become in our current modern world. But people are attracted to photos. People are attracted to pictures. If we share pictures from an event, if we share photos from something good that happened related to your book, you are taking an event that has maybe reached 15 people and you're making it reach 150 or 1,500 or more. So if you do a book signing at that bookstore that we talked about, if you do an event in the gardening center, if you have that festival, it's important to do that and it's important to be present, but it's also important to take pictures and share them with your community afterwards. Use your social media if you have it, use your mailing list, which you should have, use your website to build that transformational messaging that this is something that has made a difference. People like this is really what it comes down to. And it doesn't have to be very formal and it doesn't have to be a big deal, but it just continues to keep your work and the success of your work in a good place. I'm following a mystery writer on Instagram right now, and he just launched his first book, just self-published his first book, and he is doing such a phenomenal job of having friends and family and readers send him pictures of the book in all kinds of different places all over the country. And so, you know, it's a mystery book. So the mystery is, where is the book these days? And he's using that just kind of fun, lighthearted idea to keep his book in front of people without it being an ad, without it being a hard sell, without it being an ask, but just being a transformation as far as, look how far this book has spread. Look at all of the places where this book has reached. Why am I missing out on that? Maybe this book should also be with me. And so just think about how you can use photos, how you can use images in whatever channels that you have to reach your audience, to continue to spread that message and to continue to show in some way how happy people are to have had it. Okay, oh, I'm a little over. I want you to remember, I just threw, I think, 30 some ideas at you in 35 minutes. That was not a checklist. Don't try to do all of those things. Don't feel bad if you're not doing all of those things, or even think you should be doing those things. I just want you to have an idea of what promotional opportunities should be. And with that, Jen's back. She is going to help me sort through some of the questions that have come in and figure out what your questions are and where you can ask. If you have other things, I just want to say the screen that's up there is my website, but also my email. If you have questions that you don't want to ask in front of this whole group, feel free to email me and I will get back to you directly.
Excellent. Well, that was incredibly informative. So you may have answered some of the questions already, especially the pre-submitted ones. But again, for those of you who may have joined us late, to ask Beth a question, there's a little Q&A button bottom of the screen or top of the screen, depending on where your toolbar is. So look for that little Q&A button, and that is where we'll be grabbing them from. We have about 20 minutes, so we'll get through as many as we can during that time. Okay, let's see here. From Richard, what's a practical way to maintain and use a mailing list?
Ooh, so we talked extensively about mailing lists in the first webinar. So my first answer is go back and find that video and you can find a lot of information. However, I really believe in mailing lists. I think in the category of things an author has to have, it is the most important. So let's talk about it for a minute here as well. A mailing list is the collection of people who have committed to knowing more about you. You might find them through your website, you might find them through your events, you might find them through your writers group or your writers community. But it is the proactive way that you stay in touch with them and let them know what's happening. I don't recommend that most writers are not in a place where they're going to have super regular communication. Some of you will. Some authors have a weekly list or a weekly mailing where they send out a lot of practical information based on their area of expertise. If you're a nonfiction writer, maybe that works for you. Most of us, it doesn't. So you might be sending out a mailing, using your mailing list to teach and inform. You might also just be using your mailing list as more of an opportunity to keep people informed of what's happening with your list or with you. If you have a new release, if you have a series of, if you have events, if you're going to be at a bookstore or if you're going to be speaking at somewhere, if you have a sale or a special opportunity, use your list to let people know about that. They signed up for it because they want to know about you. But also, it's always important to remember what I call the 80-20 rule is not all of the content should be about you. Even if you are writing a newsletter that is informational and, hey, let me tell you what's up with my writing career, make sure that you are also providing something that is of immediate value to that reader. And that's going to be incredibly different based on what you're writing and what they've come to you for. You know, my publishing mailing list, my mailing list that's tied to the Author's Guide to Marketing, I send out a newsletter 3 or 4 times a year, and it has all of my speaking schedule. Some of you probably signed up for this because you got that mailing list. But it also has articles from other sources, you know, the 5 most relevant articles about marketing or about publishing, because everyone on that list is interested in books. My Camino mailing list has photos and stories and packing lists and information that would be interesting to those people. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea, and then yeah, go back and check out that first video.
Okay, excellent. There's a couple questions about the awards and such. One is from Gary. It says, with respect to awards, does being a semifinalist have practical marketing potential?
I think so. I think that it probably depends on, the size or the scale or the recognizability of the event or of the contest. But I would say even, I like to put out there that I was the bronze award winner, which is third place, which is basically a semifinalist, for a contest that I entered with my first book. I would definitely put it on the website because if nothing else, it gets that award name associated with yours.
Okay. From LaRonda, is it useful or wise to post excerpts from books on your social media?
I think it is useful. It's definitely not unwise. Your social media is something that you own, and your biggest challenge in book promotion is discoverability. What is it that you can put out there that will draw people to your words, draw people to your ideas? Now, I don't know whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, children's books, poetry. What kind of content you choose to share really depends on the kind of story or the kind of book that you're writing. But the best way for people to understand your voice is to see your voice. And if that means giving away a deleted scene to everybody who signs up for your newsletter, or that means excerpting a piece of your book and putting it on your website, I think that's probably the best way for people to know if they're interested. I have chapter 1 of the Author's Guide to Marketing for free download on my website because I want people to know what they're getting into. Also, remember that the online sellers are probably doing a look inside this book too. So it's not like your content isn't out there.
Excellent, thank you. Try to get through a couple more. From Suzanne, the big Brooklyn Book Festival is this weekend. Even though you're in Seattle, can you advise how as an attendee to promote one's book?
Oh, that's a great question. It is different to attend a book festival as an attendee. I would say a couple of things. Go there with the most extroverted, positive attitude that you can possibly draw out of yourself, which is sometimes hard for writers. Go with that promotional material. This is one of those places where having bookmarks or note cards or postcards or something will be really helpful. Start conversations with people. Not necessarily, hi, I wrote a book, let's talk about it, but go to the panels where people who will be interested in your topics are going to be and start those conversations. Like I said, one of the best conversations I had last week was in a book signing line for another author, but it happened to be somebody who was also interested in the things that I was interested in. When Association of Writers and Writing Programs was here in Seattle a couple of years ago, I went as an attendee and struck up conversations with other people because they are people who are interested in publishing. And I ended up making some really interesting connections with other authors who became influencers for me, as well as possibly readers. So you're just there. You're there to make connections. You're there to, raise awareness. Think of it as an awareness piece.
Good advice. From Lara, she says, thank you, Beth. And do you recommend hiring an independent publicist?
Ooh, good question. I forgot to cover that. It depends on your book. Oh my gosh, that is basically my answer to everything. Sorry. It really does depend on your book, though. A publicist is as helpful as your media potential is. And I think that one of the challenges sometimes is that we hire publicists for books that are going to be marketed in better channels than media outreach, than media connections. Author releases new book is not a compelling story for most major media, but also pay attention to what people are talking about right now. Pay attention to what's in the news. If you're going to spend money on a publicist, and they are not cheap, you have to know that what you're pitching is going to draw the kind of attention that will make it worth it? Do you have a book that is a hot topic in the news? Do you have a book that is related to something that everybody's talking about, and that would draw that kind of free media? Or do you have a book that has a more niche audience that you could reach out to directly? You know, I'm not using a publicist to reach out to podcasts about outdoor travel, because those are not things that need publicists. I can make that connection for myself. Probably not is my short answer, but maybe, depending on your topic.
Good answer. From Chris, should we pay Kirkus $575 for book reviews?
Oh, yeah, that. Really, it depends on the kind of book you're writing. Sorry. Think about your reader. Is your reader influenced, impressed, affected by a Kirkus review? If you're writing young adult novels, no. If you're writing fantasy or sci-fi, or people who are looking for reader reviews or peer reviews or more niche topic recommendations, I don't know that Kirkus really helps. If you're writing children's books and your goal is to get into libraries and to get into schools, and you need to get past that gatekeeper, if you need to get past that librarian, teacher, gatekeeper kind of thing, and a Kirkus review would help you do that, then maybe it is worth it. I have an author who wrote a nonfiction book that is more research, and he has the goal of having it used in classrooms in colleges, college curriculum type things. And so for him, and he self-published it, for him, a Kirkus review was worth it, because the gatekeepers that he had to get past, he felt like would be affected by seeing that. But I think that most of us are not in that place.
Okay, that's helpful. From Carolyn, how can you get reviews by places like the New York Times Book Review?
Be famous already. The New York Times Book Review is probably the pinnacle of what we all want, right? It is looking at books that have been hyped for years, months, years before those books came out. If you have a major New York publisher, a Big Five publisher, and you are the most popular hot thing on your season's list, and people are really talking about it before the book comes out, that's going to draw the New York Times' attention. If your book has been out for a while and gets famous in another way, like the New York Times Book Review is not the first step. It almost turns out to be the reactive step. If you've done something that has drawn a huge amount of attention, if you have, somehow created an event that 100,000 people came to, that's when the New York Times Book Review is going to start paying attention, and they're going to talk about you in that way. But that is somewhere where you really do need one of the publicists who knows how to get in those doors.
Yes.
I don't know an author who has done that on their own.
So, from Mark, my first nationally recognized book is a how-to medical topic, and the new book is a World War II family memoir. Can I use the first book to promote the second book?
Oh, as someone who wrote a book for writers about marketing and then wrote a travel memoir about walking, I feel you. I think that you can make an initial step. I think you should tell your mailing list, you should tell your audience that you do have this new book. Don't expect a huge amount of follow-over, but some of them will be interested. Some of them will pick that up. But don't try to overlap those two audiences past that first connection. Don't try to keep selling your medical mailing list on the idea of a family memoir. Introduce them to it and give them a way to opt in separately. You may be in a place, I found that I was in a place where I needed two different web presences altogether. My audiences and my product was just too different. And so I am uncomfortably now managing two websites and two mailing lists. but everything kind of combines back into my social media. And so if people are looking at the Beth Jusino personal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, they're seeing that I'm doing both of those things. So I'm trying to keep a little bit of an overlap, but I'm also not expecting that one audience is really going to connect to that other. So tell them once is my short answer.
Okay. Another question is, are there strategies that fail more than succeed? So I guess, of all the strategies you've talked about today, is there a good place to start maybe? What's the most bang for your buck, I guess?
Are there strategies? I don't know that there are strategies that fail more often than others. I will say that probably the things that have been most frustrating for the authors that I know are spending a lot of money on either advertising or publicity, a publicist, and not seeing the return that they were hoping for. Those are huge investments, and so often lead to huge disappointments. As far as the things that the things that work the most, I do believe in the mailing list. I do believe in being present and being in front of your readers as much as possible. I think it's hard for writers who are sometimes introverted to put themselves out there. Go to the conventions, go to the conferences, bring your material, chat up your book, chat about the fact that this is what you do and this is what you're passionate about. Take a risk, sign up to speak about a topic if that's something that you can do. Getting that attention, rising above the noise, building that platform piece is the hardest thing, but also is the thing that will bring you the readers who are meant to find you in the best ways.
Yes, excellent advice. I think we have time for about one more. A couple questions about where to find places to find the book awards, specifically for nonfiction for this question.
Oh, that is a good question. Does the Authors Guild have, I know your email newsletter often has.
Yeah, that is one place.
Yeah, the Authors Guild, the email newsletter has information about various awards and things that are coming out, but I don't know where you collect those.
We do have a place on the website. I think also Poets and Writers has quite an extensive contest list. But yes, if you're not signed up for our e-newsletter, do that, because we do always include those at the bottom of our newsletter, the upcoming contests for next month. They're not always just nonfiction, but we usually have them separated out by like genre or whatever there. So that is one place, but I didn't know if you know of any other ones that.
Well, and I think this comes back to look at your comparative titles. Are there things that, are there topics that keep coming up? Are there names that keep coming up? So I recently discovered, or in the process of writing nonfiction, I discovered the Nautilus Awards, which I had never heard of before, but have been around for a long time. My publisher assures me are respected in booksellers and libraries, specifically for books that are out to change the world in some way. And so they have a very specific message, but I kept seeing that name in titles that were related to mine or titles that were popular with people who read my books. And so maybe it's just a question of spending a little time with Google and spending a little time looking at other books that are your comparative titles and seeing how that works. Also, if you are part of an organization like the Independent Book Publishers IBPA Association, the Independent Book Publishers Association, which I know a lot of small presses and independent authors are, they have an awards grouping and information about their awards. And always the genre awards, if you're part of Romance Writers of America, there's awards there. If you're a mystery writer, there's the Edgars and there's the mystery writer, mystery specific awards. And so look for those awards that are supporting the specific types of books that you're looking for, rather than thinking the best thing to do is to, submit yourself for a Nobel or a Pulitzer. Although you could do that too.
Excellent. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I just want to quickly show people where they can find the recordings. This webinar is being recorded. So if it's something that you want to refer back to, if you gave us your email address when you signed up for the webinar, we are going to send it to everyone once we get the recording. So that's one way to get it. To find the previous webinar that Beth did, if you jump over to our website, you go to member benefits and the writer's resource library. So under here, you'll see all kinds of topics. Under marketing and publicity, we have lots of articles, and we also have any of the recordings that we've previously done about these types of subjects. So Beth's is in there, I believe here.
Long-term marketing strategies, there it is.
And if you just click that, that'll jump you over to our YouTube channel. Or you can take the shortcut and just go straight to the YouTube channel for the Authors Guild. If you Google that, that'll give you a list of all of our recordings as well. And again, sign up for our e-newsletter. We always usually send out announcements about our upcoming webinars and things that you should sign up for. So that's another good way to know what's coming up or to grab recordings that have already happened. So thank you, Beth. Thank you, everyone who joined us. Once again, another wonderful seminar with you.
All right.
And everyone that is with us, check your email and we will send you the recording later.
Thanks so much for everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.